The most ordinary, yet profoundly strange and awe-inspiring thing is consciousness, our subjective experience of reality. Each of us has a unique inner world, a first-hand felt experience of whatever this is that we're experiencing. How wild, amazing, and normal is that? We perceive the external world through our senses, the sights, sounds, and sensations around us. But what's truly marvelous is that these external stimuli trigger subjective feelings, thoughts, and emotions within us that go far beyond the physical properties of the things themselves. A sunset doesn't just look a certain way. It also makes us feel a certain way. This inner experience just arises naturally, without our effort. There are plenty of theories trying to explain human consciousness, like the idea that it emerges from the precise neural architecture in our brains, as if our brains somehow solve the consciousness puzzle. And organisms that have not solved the puzzle like we have do not have the rich feelings like we do, right? We also have the distinct advantage of being able to communicate our conscious states to each other through language. We can describe and validate that we all seem to have a rich inner mental life of thoughts, feelings, and first-person experiences. This shared understanding allows us to mutually acknowledge that yes, we are indeed subjective, conscious beings, not just unaware biological automatons. Maybe a few other animals, like dolphins and chimps, have a glimmer of what we have, but a jellyfish? Probably not. But what if our assumptions about the nature of consciousness are too narrow? As James Bridle writes in his book, Ways of Being, where we start to move forward is when we learn to ask questions, which are less concerned with, are you like us? And more interested in what is it like to be you. The concept of umwelt, introduced by biologist Jacob von Uskul, proposes that every organism has its own subjective reality, its own self-centered universe filtered through that being's unique senses and neural makeup. It's an inclusive approach suggesting consciousness exists across the tree of life, not just in animals with human-like intelligence. For example, a jellyfish's umwelt, its actual experience of reality, is surely vastly different from our own, yet an umwelt just the same. Mounting scientific evidence hints that consciousness may be far more widespread than our biases assume, arising in forms we can scarcely conceive based on our limited view. Tests like the mirror test, where animals must recognize themselves to be considered self-aware, exemplify this narrow perspective. Failing this test hardly means an organism lacks any form of conscious experience. It simply reflects our inadequate understanding of other beings. The natural world likely teems with awe-inspiring forms of subjective experience, waiting to be understood on their own terms. Astounding alien modes of awareness we are only just beginning to consider. In this video, we'll dive into the fascinating and often overlooked evidence for how stunningly diverse organisms, from simple life forms to intelligent animals, might experience the world. Get ready to have your assumptions about the boundaries of consciousness challenged and expanded. I'm Charlie, this is Stimulus, and I'm so happy you're here. If you like these videos, perhaps you'd like to subscribe. There are at least two benefits to this. You can stay up to date with all my new content, as well as help me get on the good side of the YouTube algorithm. Now subscribe, and let's get into it. Our first stop on this journey takes us into the depths of the ocean, where we encounter a creature with a truly alien form of intelligence, the octopus. Let's begin by imagining being an octopus and inhabiting its unique umwelt. Your consciousness isn't confined to a central brain. Instead, it's distributed across 8 semi-independent arms. Each arm tastes, touches, and makes decisions on its own. That's right. Just think if your fingers were tongues, allowing you to taste everything you touch. Or if your tongue had a mind of its own. You'd probably have a drastically different experience of reality than us humans. Thousands of suckers, lined with chemoreceptors, independently explore textures, colors, and movements. It's almost as if each arm is its own organism, fused to the octopus. However, this decentralized brain results in a remarkably fluid experience of reality. Studying how these creatures sense and engage with their environment helps us question traditional views of intelligence. Recent research reveals that octopus arms contain about 330 million neurons, roughly 1/3 of their total neuron count. helping explain the extraordinary problem-solving abilities of each arm. They navigate mazes, open jars, and handle objects with a dexterity that rivals our own. Moreover, their unique physiology includes specialized color-changing cells called chromatophores, which allow them to blend into their surroundings seamlessly. That is amazing as it is, but octopi happen to be colorblind. There's obviously a lot we don't know about these little ocean aliens. For example, we have an understanding of redness or blueness and any of the colors we can imagine. However, how does an octopus accomplish this? Unlike humans who experience a unified consciousness, an octopus simultaneously inhabits multiple sensory dimensions through its arm's divergent points of awareness. An incredibly adaptive, decentralized intelligence profoundly different from our own. And while vastly different, these creatures are obviously very smart, so it's not a big leap to say an octopus has a consciousness. What do you think? But intelligence isn't limited to the oceans. Let's take to the skies and explore the remarkable cognition of our feathered friends. Now imagine life as a corvid, the family of birds that include the raven, magpie, and blue jay. Despite the common misconception that birds are unintelligent, often reflected in the derogatory term bird brain, corvids exhibit problem-solving skills that are similar to ours. Who's a bird brain now? Me, thank you very much. They navigate their environment using their beaks and feet to create and manipulate tools, much like how we use our hands. New Caledonian crows, for instance, have been observed using sticks to extract insects from hard-to-reach places, and even creating compound tools from multiple parts to solve complex problems. These birds demonstrate the ability to plan and innovate, showcasing advanced cognitive skills previously thought to be exclusive to primates. However, corvid intelligence goes beyond mere tool use. Magpies exhibit fascinating behaviors that suggest a deep level of social intelligence and consciousness within their umwelt. When a magpie dies, other magpies often gather around the body, engaging in what appears to be a form of mourning. People have documented magpies making specific vocalizations and interacting with the corpse, almost as if they're paying their respects. Some magpies have even been seen placing twigs, grass, or other objects over the deceased, a behavior reminiscent of our burial rituals. I found an intriguing story online about this. The story goes, I have a farm in Bolton, UK, which recently experienced an overwhelming presence of magpies. The reaction to finding a dead magpie was reminiscent to a scene from The Birds. They surrounded the lifeless bird, attempting to revive it with their beaks. Once they realized it was indeed dead, they erupted into a cacophony of loud cackling noises that reached a dramatic crescendo. Approximately 20 magpies were present, and their calls were soon echoed by sympathetic responses from a nearby wood and the surrounding areas, creating the impression that hundreds of magpie were mourning the death simultaneously. It was an unnerving experience, and I stayed safely inside the barn until the commotion subsided. These intricate social behaviors challenge our perception of bird intelligence, suggesting corvids possess a sophisticated level of social complexity and emotional depth tied to their distinctive way of being. Their actions around death hint at an understanding of life and loss that is surprisingly close to our mourning practices. These similarities to us make it pretty easy to conceptualize their umwelt. But what about creatures much different from our own? Let's look into the umwelt of our six-legged cousins. Consider life as a little tiny ant. Your consciousness isn't individual, but tied to an entire colony, a unified collection achieving incredible feats through the coordination of thousands of roles and actions. This colonial umwelt is vastly different from our individualistic human experience. These harmonious societies construct marvels through the cumulative self-organization of simple individual behaviors, a phenomenon known as stigmergy. Stigmergy is when an individual leaves clues in an environment that help others know what to do. For example, when ants find food, they leave a scent trail. Other ants follow this trail to find the food too. The innate-driven cooperation within these superorganisms reveals an intelligence vastly different from our individualistic human cognition. At the colony level, these insect societies display hallmarks of advanced intelligence, managing complex resource logistics, constructing intricate architectures, and potentially transmitting learned information across generations. There is a behavior called tandem running, where an older ant shows a younger ant where to find food. The older ant leads the younger ant to the food by walking slowly and waiting for the younger ant to catch up. By following the older ant a few times, the younger one learns and remembers the path to the food. This seems like pretty good evidence that ants don't work simply off instinct. Also, Argentine ants have created a massive super colony in southern Europe, stretching from Italy to Portugal, covering an area larger than the size of Delaware. This super colony consists of interconnected nests with millions of chambers and tunnels, allowing ants to move and work efficiently across this vast area. Researchers found that these ants cooperate across different nests, which help them maintain such an extensive network. This cooperative behavior is unique compared to their smaller, more aggressive colonies in their native South America. Communication in bee societies is also very detailed. Bees use waggle dances to show the exact location of flower fields up to 6 miles away. The direction of the dance indicates where the flowers are, and the length of the dance tells how far it is away. Scout bees also use these dances to show potential nest sites. The whole colony decides on the best location based on these dances. This unique communication system is a vital part of how bees interact with their environment. Since they don't have vocal cords, they just gotta dance. And it's about to get stranger. Provocative research hints at glimmers of self-awareness in individual insects as well. I'll have one of my favorite science fiction authors, Peter Watts, explain.
Okay, let us start with a couple of ants, one on either side of a piece of plexiglass. They pretty much ignore each other, show complete indifference, nothing really interesting there. Now put one ant in front of a mirror. Now he pays attention. Now he goes up to the pane, starts to check out his reflection, sort of taps his antenna against the glass, shows a level of interest that he never showed before when he actually was confronted with a real ant on the other side of the plexiglass. Stick a dot of blue paint on his head. Now he goes up, checks out his reflection, and starts to groom his head as if to try and get rid of that weird-ass piece of blue paint that just suddenly appeared for no good reason. He does not try to groom the reflection, which is where he actually saw the paint. This is starting to get creepy. So maybe he didn't see it, maybe he felt it, maybe the paint itched or something. So instead of blue paint, use brown paint, something that blends in with the cuticle, something that the ant will not be able to see in reflection, but which will still itch if itching is a problem. He does not groom. Okay, we're starting to reach now. But maybe it's something in the pigment. Maybe blue paint itches and brown paint doesn't. So, go back to blue paint, but stick it on the back of the head so that it'll still itch, but he won't be able to see it in the mirror. No grooming behavior. I'm generally not one to jump to conclusions, but I'm having a really hard time interpreting these results as anything other than ants can recognize themselves in mirrors.
Now, let's turn our attention to consciousness without neurology. We tend to associate consciousness solely with brains and neural networks. However, there are some remarkable abilities exhibited by plants that suggest they possess a sophisticated form of awareness, operating through very different mechanisms to create their own unique umwelt. A striking example, researchers discovered plants can detect and respond to the sound vibrations of a threat, revealing a sensory capacity we never imagined. Essentially, plants can hear. They played recordings of a caterpillar munching on some leaves to some plants. In response, these plants produced more mustard oils, a chemical defense mechanism. This ability to hear and react accordingly demonstrates that plants have more senses and subjective experiences than are outwardly apparent to us. Another fascinating case is the mimosa plant, sometimes known as the sensitive plant. It can rapidly fold its leaves through electrical signals racing through its cells at over 100 meters per second. If you touch it, it'll fold up in response. In fact, this is one of the fastest plant movements known, hinting at a distributed nervous system governing its responsiveness. Even more intriguing, plants like the mimosa exhibit long-term memory and learned behaviors. You heard that right. This plant can remember. In a study, when dropped, mimosas initially closed their leaves following the impact. But as this is repeated, eventually they recognize the fall as harmless and refrain from closing their leaves. Basically, they stop flinching. This learned response persists over weeks, hinting at long-term memory and learning capabilities. In Ways of Being, Bridle explained how difficult this research was to publish due to the astounding nature of the results. This is an astonishing discovery. Not only does it run counter to everything we thought we knew about plants, but it radically overhauls the very categories of knowledge we have for understanding them. So much so that it took years for Gigliano to publish her results, following rejections from over a dozen academic journals, many of which would not even acknowledge reading her unpublished paper, let alone send it out for peer review. Part of this problem is innate academic conservatism. Upending decades of understanding is not only hard to do, it's hard to imagine and acknowledge. But another part is simply bureaucratic. Where to put this new knowledge? Whose domain does it fall under? Is this botany or physiology, ethology or psychology? The very existence of such sophisticated non-neurological intelligence and consciousness challenges our conception of mind and cognition. Plant awareness reveals intelligence doesn't require a brain as we thought we knew. It shows consciousness can arise through utterly different structures and mechanisms, each creating a unique umwelt, if we have the humility to try to understand it. So we've discovered that consciousness likely exists in many different forms across the natural world. From the distributed minds of octopus to the complex social behaviors of crows, the coordinated colonies of ants and bees, and even the surprising abilities of plants. Each organism experiences reality in its own unique way based on its particular senses and capabilities. Umwelt reminds us that every being inhabits its own subjective universe, shaped by how it perceives and interacts with its environment. For an octopus, reality is tasted and felt by 8 arms acting like separate entities. For a bee, the world is communicated through intricate waggle dances. Traditionally, we assume consciousness only exists in creatures like ourselves with brains and familiar neural structures. This human-centric view severely limits our understanding. By opening our minds to the possibility of umwelt, radically different subjective experiences, we can appreciate the vast diversity of potential consciousnesses around us. Perhaps an ant colony functions as a single superorganism intelligence. Maybe plants employ unconventional molecular processes to learn and remember. These possibilities challenge our old beliefs about what consciousness requires. Instead of debating narrow definitions of intelligence, Bridle suggests we should strive to understand what is it like to be each entity we encounter. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really hope you learned something new. Perhaps it has altered your own umwelt. I love making videos like this because I end up expanding my own knowledge and understanding of this incredible existence we are in. Do you like these videos? If so, let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe. See you soon.